interview recorded with Donald Judd by Ian North, 30th of May 1974. Well, Don, can I first ask you what prompted you to come here?
Oh, well, let's see. Obviously, a chance to make peace, which is a laudable reason.
Gallery patrons generally don't know what it is. They don't think it's a sculpture or even a work of art generally, and treat it often like a table or play equipment. So they're surprised when they learn that it's actually a masterpiece of American minimalism.
It is, it's big, it's sharp, it's angular, it's modern. It has this big question mark about it. Oh, what is that? Actually, I like that. This is kind of, curious, enigmatic thing about it, I suppose.
So it's just inspired in terms of the geometry, almost the impossible geometry that he was infusing into that sculpture. It's extraordinary, and we're very fortunate to have it.
One of the most important aspects of Donald Judd's objects is its relationship to the surrounding space and everything that surrounds it beyond the immediate space.
He wanted to really recognise that the environment that you presented something in was intrinsic to the experience of the work of art itself.
I think works like this offer these really beautiful moments of contemplation and focus because we're not thinking about what it's about. We're not thinking about landscape or figure or narrative. It is what it is. Pay attention to it.
But it does seem to evoke conversation, and some people still don't like it at all. But the story of how it was built is really quite fascinating.
Why Adelaide has this major site-specific sculpture by Donald Judd is the result of an exhibition that came to Adelaide in 1974, and that was called Recent American Art. It was a touring exhibition from the Museum of Modern Art in New York.
It was an exhibition of minimal art and conceptual art, so that was very much our international art of the moment, by leading artists.
One of the exhibiting artists, Donald Judd, was interested in exploring the possibility of doing a large sculpture while in Australia. John Stringer, who was working at MoMA, wrote to Peter Laverty, the director, in Sydney and offered the work to Sydney. They weren't able to find a suitable site. The director in Adelaide, John Bailey, jumped at the chance and said, yes, we'd do it here.
So if we take ourselves back to 1974, the Vietnam moratorium campaigns and demonstrations had been in the earlier part of the 1970s. By May 1974, an exhibition comes to Adelaide, Recent American Art. It had been held at the Art Gallery of New South Wales and pretty much passed without protest. It came to Adelaide, a very different reception.
There was quite a lot of modern sculptural pieces and so on that people didn't necessarily like. It was a provoking kind of exhibition.
The exhibition in Adelaide was really heavily protested by the progressive art movement.
We reject the nihilism, the hedonism and the elitism underlying some recent American art. We demand a robust popular art that speaks from and to the real concerns of the world's men and women. We recognise that the most important pleasure to be derived from art is that of correctly understanding the world, and that a correct understanding of the world must result in a determined struggle against US imperialism. Art must be involved in that struggle.
When news of the commission got out, it was the cause of a lot of unrest.
They conducted a relentless campaign against the Judd sculpture. It was fairly clear something was happening outside the back of the art gallery. Measurements were being taken, trenches were being dug. So their first action was to write a letter to John Bailey. You know, they were incensed. Trees had been cut down, and it was fairly clear that a Judd sculpture was going to be installed.
Judd was such a strong anti-war activist. He was so open and verbal about America not being a colonial power in the world that he was himself very verbal in expressing discontent over the Vietnam War.
Judd actually shared the political sentiments and the political opinions of these protesters. He had been very active in the anti-Vietnam War movement. The tragedy, in some sense, might be for Judd, and it must have been painful for him, is that that kind of resonance was not visible to students at the time.
If we look at the commission with hindsight, it was an inspired commission. That the political battle lines in 1974 couldn't recognise that because of their ideology. But now, with hindsight, it was an inspired commission.
I don't think John Bailey did regret commissioning the work. He stood by the decision and wrote letters of response. And really those protests did not continue into the later 70s.
I love seeing how it was made.
Yeah. I just love how it's, you know, just the timber, everything is just so not high-tech.
Elemental.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's, you know, it's so much in conversation with the architecture of the time, even looking at some of the kind of the brickwork and the geometry.
When Donald Judd arrived in Adelaide, he worked with Philip Farger, who was on the board at the Art Gallery of South Australia. The making of the work was actually exceedingly complex.
My husband Philip was on the board of the art gallery then, and I think they thought that his skills as a construction engineer would be just the right match for Donald Judd. He was no taller than me, very direct, strong American accent, of course, knew exactly what he wanted and wouldn't be satisfied till he knew that the sculpture was going to be made exactly as he wanted it. And of course he wasn't here for the construction of it.
Donald Judd made his drawings when he came to the gallery. The art gallery had to negotiate an arrangement between a number of stakeholders to deliver a very complex and technical build.
When the board commissioned it, I don't think they realised how big it was going to be. I don't think anybody realised how big it was going to be. Donald Judd had put the 3 wooden pegs in place, and they were so far apart that people were quite dismayed.
These are the earliest drawings that we have in a ballpoint pen using just some notepaper that was nearby. He made a sketch, and you can see where he's sort of thinking about the possible place of the triangle. And then once he's made that sort of initial drawing, the next one you can see here is more detailed, and then also we have the more finished drawings. And these more finished drawings were the instructions for the engineers and for the gallery on which to base the entire construction of the work. It's been a surprise to me as a curator to learn just how complex concrete is.
Particularly that top edge, which was the nightmare to do.
The top edge of it is beveled so that one side of the triangle follows the slope of the land. The other side follows the horizontal line.
There's this contrast in this sculpture that is absolutely central and probably the most important aspect of this sculpture. Judd actually posed a kind of absolute level of the kind of horizon line against the line in the sculpture that traces the sloped ground, that is very relative and that actually has changed over time. This has to do very much with the way we conduct ourselves or experience ourselves in the world. We have a desire for a kind of level ground, and when the ground is sloped, we kind of make up for it.
He chose pine sheeting that the concrete would be poured against. And that pine, you can see the imprint of in the sculpture. How strange is it to have the imprint of wood on concrete?
The Adelaide sculpture is also very related to other works that Judd made that one might characterize as his topographic objects. He was very inspired by 2 summers that he spent in Baja California in Mexico in 1970 and 1971, and developed ideas for triangular houses, very much related to this Adelaide sculpture. There's a whole series of objects that Judd then makes in 1971. One's known as the Pulitzer object. It was made for Pulitzer family in St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States, that are 2 rectangular enclosures. The inner rectangle traces the slope of the land. The outer is level. So you actually have the reverse of the Adelaide sculpture. Then he makes a sculpture in Arnhem, Netherlands, for an exhibition called Zoonspeek 71, from cold rolled steel. Also a sculpture that is placed outside. He also makes one of these topographic objects for the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, which famously was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright with a kind of ramp-like structure that circles up. So very difficult to place a kind of, even sculpture there. Judd loved that in relationship to this topographic thinking. He also is commissioned to create one of these for the architect Philip Johnson's glass house in Connecticut. And this is also, like the Adelaide sculpture, made from concrete. Like the Adelaide sculpture, it is made of one thick wall. Unlike the Adelaide sculpture, it is a circle rather than a triangle. There are not many outdoor public works that Judd made, in part because it's a very, very difficult thing to pull off. If you're an artist that is so interested in controlling the space, Judd very much had a desire with these outdoor artworks to permanently control and show his artwork in such a way that it was the way he had conceived it of. It is now 50 years after this object was made, and these buildings may not be there forever. The configuration of the path changes, the slope of the ground changes. Museum art comes and goes, but Judd wanted to create something that had greater permanence.
It's quite an interesting object in that sense because it's a challenge to a normal day-to-day object conservation, which in some respects is a bit more straightforward. It's outside, it's meant to be outside, so it endures a lot of conditions which normal objects that I would be dealing with wouldn't have to put up with. So there's the extremes of temperature, there's rain, sunshine. Some people with nefarious intent can intervene with it. So the treatments we try and restrict them to a fairly low level, not too interventive. Like all of us, it's getting its freckles and wrinkles, it's aging gracefully.
I remember Don coming back from Australia and he really loved it. My relationship to the pieces actually has more to do with Don coming back and marveling about the size of ranches in Australia. Don was interested in materials. He started out as a painter, but of course when you paint something you're hiding the material upon which it's applied. He wanted to deal directly with space and materials. But he was attracted to the desert because the landscape was clear and evident. The concrete is the same, and the relating the piece to the land is a similar thing where you make something evident that's not necessarily evident. And concrete has a nice visceral quality to it. One of the good things about a permanent work is you can deal with something with concrete, which normally you wouldn't necessarily do in a temporary work. And the concrete has a very specific character to it that it's really nice, and clearly he appreciated it a lot.
Donald Judd is considered really one of the leading artists of 20th century American art.
As soon as you tell international artists that you have a permanent Donald Judd within the gallery, people can't believe it because they're so rare. And a poured concrete work by Donald Judd is an incredibly rare piece. Die-hard Donald Judd and minimalist fans do a pilgrimage to come here to see this work and to kind of circumnavigate it in space.
As a work of art, it's a great talking point. A lot of people don't like it at all. Other people rave about it, and some people think we're incredibly lucky to have a work like that at our gallery. I mean, fashions change, ideas change. Will everybody still realise what a great piece it is in 10 or 20 more years? What will it look like in 10 or 20 more years? These are all things that we can only guess at, really. To me, the fact of doing it at all is quite remarkable.
So now, 50 years on, when we consider the Donald Judd sculpture, it was an inspired commission. Despite all the protest that happened in 1974, right now, we can truly say it was an inspired commission.
The object mellows and people's reactions mellow, and their views change on things. It's a lovely part of its nature.
I feel very lucky to live in a place that has a Donald Judd, let alone this Donald Judd. It's very, very easy for me to love that work, and I am hoping that as time goes on and people can choose to spend time with it, choose to be open to the work, that they will learn to love it as much as I do.
Artists can be radical. They can also have aesthetically pleasing works. The artists that combine both are really rare. I think he's rare in the sense that he has a philosophical system underpinning all of the work and the aesthetics and the architecture and the furniture design. And so that's kind of why he has an outsized influence on both architecture design and art.